Welcome to another DragonLance Saga Professionals episode. My name is Adam, and today I'm talking with DragonLance illustrator Matt Stawicki. You can find him in social media, and he has a website where he sells prints and features illustrated series of paintings you can purchase. I'd like to once again take a moment and thank the members of this YouTube channel and invite you to consider becoming a member by visiting the links in the description below. You can even pick up DragonLance gaming materials using my affiliate link. Matt and I discuss his early history in the industry, some of his time working on DragonLance paintings, the different projects he's working on now, and we even touch on what's coming in the future. It was a real pleasure speaking with him, and I hope you enjoy our interview. How are you?
How you doing, Adam? Good to see you. Good to be here.
I'm absolutely thrilled about this. If anyone out there, if you're not familiar with Matt's work, you've clearly never read any fantasy or sci-fi work or played any games lately, because you've been doing this for a long time and you are everywhere. So your success is well deserved. Let's, if we can, kind of want to do a little time machine action here and go back in time a little bit. At what point did you decide, or did you first get introduced to the idea of being a fine artist and illustrator?
Well, you know, I always drew as a kid. Okay, so this is going way back. Even, you know, my interest in fantasy comes from, you know, an interest in dinosaurs and things like that when I was really young. And I think like a lot of people. And then, of course, sci-fi came into the picture when Star Wars came out and stuff like that in the late 70s. Not, you know, I was pretty young then, but that had a huge impact on the whole culture at that point. And as I got into high school, you know, I drew a lot, and I seemed to have an aptitude for it, and I like to spend a lot of time doing it. So my parents were supportive, and you know, we decided that art school was, you know, was a way to go.
Yeah.
So I think it was, I don't know that I really knew I was going to be a fantasy illustrator at that point, but, you know, a career in the arts to some capacity was what I was looking to do. So, and you know, I had some family friends and things that were in different parts of the business. Some were graphic designers, some were photographers. So they could give me some advice. But it really wasn't until I got into art school that I discovered, you know, I guess I knew some of the Frazetta paintings and Boris Villet paintings.
Right.
Before that, they were very iconic, but I really didn't know who these guys were until then. That's when I really sunk my teeth into that stuff. And once I saw that, there was no turning back. You know, for me, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So before that point, what were your influences artistically?
You know, a lot of it was album covers. You know, I've always been into music. You know, I play guitar as a hobby too.
Oh,
so, but you know, I was into heavy metal and stuff like that in the '80s, and the album covers were great back then. Again, there were guys that now I've come to know, but like Ken Kelly, for example, was one who did some Kiss album covers, and he did a Rainbow album cover that were, back then, these big illustrative pieces of art, 12 by 12 inches, you're holding in your hand. So, you know, I would copy these kind of things. I would paint jean jackets for people and stuff like that awesome. In high school. You know, so that's kind of the beginning of that, where it started. So I guess, you know, my influence was just copying other people. Derek Riggs from Iron Maiden was a big influence. A lot of people, you know, love that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's really where it started. And then, you know, but I think I knew then that there was some commercial viability to the work, because I was seeing it on album covers and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't sure how to get into it at that point, but I at least knew that somebody was making these things. And I thought maybe I had a chance at that, or I would like to do that.
Yeah. Did you feel like art school for you really sort of propelled you from being a novice to, you know, a true professional, or do you feel like, you know, your professional skills were honed actually doing work, you know, for real clients?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, art school allowed me to try a lot of different things, a lot of different techniques. It allowed me to experiment in things as much to find out what I didn't like as what I did like. Um, I did used a lot of dry medium before oil paint.
Hmm.
I actually was big into airbrush at one point in
Oh,
art
really?
school, colored pencil, different things like that. A technique that would be like Drew Struzan or Struzan, however you say his last name. I was using a technique similar to his then.
Wow.
And it wasn't, again, it wasn't until I really found Boris and Frazetta that I was like, okay, oil paint. This is the way we want to go with the medium. So I
Yeah.
was just really excited about what they were producing, and I just figured that was, if I wanted to do that, I would use the tools that they were using.
Yeah. Well, and with the entire industry of fine arts, there was this real solid period of time where it was all traditional mediums,
Yeah,
acrylic and oil, but then it
yeah.
sort of took this real hard left into the digital realm. Did you ever find that transition difficult, or do you feel like you were young enough to make that transition easier than maybe some of the people you were influenced by?
Well, I graduated art school in 1991, so the computer was in its
Yeah.
infancy.
Yeah.
And the first eight or so years of my being in the field as a professional were done completely in oil, and then I transitioned into doing almost all digital work for a pretty good number of years. And a lot of the Dragonlance work initially is actually done digitally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. So now I kind of work back and forth between them pretty fluidly, and even to the point where if I feel like I'm running out of time on an oil painting, I have the means here in the studio to photograph it, bring it into Photoshop, finish it for the client, get back to the painting later.
Right.
Uh, you know, or if I draw something in the computer that I like and I want to just finish it as a painting, I can print it out and work over it to some degree, work over like a sketch or an underpainting. So the technology is really, I mean, amazing from where it was 30 years ago. It's you can do so much with the tools, and
Yeah.
it's for me as a professional, it's about speed to some degree. Fine art is a little bit different, but it is still about efficiency in the process. So
Yeah.
for me, the digital tools are great. I mean, I love them. I didn't have them. I wasn't trained with them really
Hmm.
initially, so
So it was all
that
just
part.
self-discovery of the software?
Yeah, yeah,
Trial and error.
and among some of my peers that were into it as well. But yeah, we just bought computers and uh, dug in. We were
Yeah.
already doing it, already in the business, just doing everything traditionally at that point. But wanted to try and take advantage of some of the technology we were seeing.
Did you ever have a mentor, someone that was already, sort of in the business professionally that you sort of looked to for advice, and or was it just a peer support group that you had?
Well, I definitely did. There was a guy. He was a Western painter. His name is Ken Lager, and he did a lot of Louis L'Amour book covers. He would do
Oh,
Western
yeah.
and Civil War subjects. So he was sort of doing professionally what I wanted to do. It just wasn't fantasy.
Hmm.
And his work was great. It was very realistic. He did big landscape paintings, and I understudied with him for about 2 years, really all together. And he helped me put together the portfolio that we then took to who was an agent who was his rep at the time, and he introduced me to this person.
That was great.
So that's sort of how I really got into it, really professionally.
So that's something
And
I'm
he
not.
just,
Yeah, I'm not sure the public understands that even artists and illustrators, traditional artists, need. I guess you can do it without it, but need agents. I mean, it's a real thing.
yeah,
I work in
yeah,
an ad
yeah,
agency, and we regularly get submissions from agencies of the artists that they rep, and just sort of
yeah.
showcase their work. Do you find nowadays, and I say nowadays because again, I work in advertising, so my industry uses less and less illustration and fine arts, as opposed to photography primarily. Do you find that impacting you at all in your industry, or is
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, in the book cover industry for sure, I would
yeah,
say most of that industry has moved in that direction now, to where they're either using, large, like a lot of typography,
Yeah.
it's or just a small iconic symbol or something like that. I think it's because, and this is sort of my personal feeling, but in the days of the brick and mortars, the Barnes and Nobles, you'd walk in and you'd have this big wall of artwork essentially to look at, and you had to have, the goal of the artist was to make that book jump out from that. Well, people aren't really shopping for books like that anymore, and I think that the book companies have figured out that it's cheaper to do it without the Illustrator, which was a pretty big expense to go with a painted cover every time.
Yeah.
So the book cover industry has definitely changed. It's definitely more Photoshop type of images. I don't mean painted in Photoshop, but it's just something that's Photoshopped together.
Visual compositions and such.
Yeah. Things that are done by in-house design teams that will handle large groups of covers. So it's just a different time.
Yeah.
But for me, it's it's given me the opportunity to go back to paint and sort of develop what I never did as a commercial illustrator, which was my sort of fine art. I don't know if you want to call it a following, but just to paint for myself and then try and sell the paintings, which has been actually doing pretty well the last year or two. So that's been great.
That's awesome. I have felt like just on the sort of the fan side of things, and I don't know, again, it could all be just anecdotal to my experience, but there has been a sort of resurgence of being obsessed with particular artists and sort of following their careers. And I'm sure that's always been a thing. It's just been awoken in my mind as of late. Is that something, again, that you have experienced a sort of resurgence, or is this just something that, once you start catering to that audience, it becomes more aware of it?
Well, for me, it's just happening now because I'm, and I wouldn't say just the last year or two, for the last 10 years, I've really been back into oil painting. Has a lot to do with, there's a show that I'm a part of every year, IluxCon. IX Arts, and they really champion the art, the imaginative realism subject, and it's just a great collector base, and it's just a great thing to be a part of. But it's something that I do some work for that show every year, and through that I've gained some audience for some of my paintings that aren't just book covers and things. I've been working with a series of what I call my Dragons in Nature series for a couple of years now in my spare time, but I'm really starting to kind of lean into that more full time now since
that's great.
Since it's been working out.
Yeah.
People seem to like the dragons, so, and I do too. So that's great,
Yeah. Well, what do you recall what your first, truly what you would have considered your first professional gig was? Sort of getting your foot in the door, as it were?
Well, in art school, I did, the school had I can't remember if it was like a little competition that we did or something, but I did an illustration along with another guy at the time, was a friend of mine that I went to art school with, and it was for a local magazine. That was actually the first time I worked really with an art director.
Yeah.
But the first book I ever did, the first real book cover I ever did once I got an agent in New York was for Tour Books. And I don't remember the author's name, but I remember the book was called Moon of Ice. Mm-hmm. And it was just a rendering of planet Earth and the moon. And it was pretty simple, but at the time I was, thrilled to death to just to have that level of work. So it was really exciting.
There is something to be said, and if you're not in the industry or an industry that's sort of tangentially connected, you would never really know that feeling. But, for me, it's going and seeing packaging on a shelf or seeing a magazine in an ad or a billboard or something. And so I can only imagine it extrapolates exactly to what you're speaking to, of walking into a store and seeing your artwork lined up on a shelf. Right. There's this sense of genuine, accomplishment and gratitude, and just happiness.
Definitely. definitely.
Yeah.
And Pride. I mean, and Dragonlance was a real one that I didn't expect. When I started working on it, the odd thing was the first cover that I did was Dragons of a Fallen Sun, which was a new book.
Yep.
And I was doing a character, Mina, that hadn't been shown before, and I wasn't really even 100% in my mind. I remember the title, the working title wasn't Dragons of a Fallen Sun or something, and I wasn't even really sure it was Dragonlance. Basically, is the gist of what I'm getting at. And then when this thing hit, the next one was Autumn Twilight that I did, so I knew I was in it. Then it really was. It was amazing to see those books everywhere because I had been in the business for a little while at that point and had done some other things, but this really had a very loyal fan following. We'll just say.
It's not just the novels either, and I do want to sort of put a pin in the idea of how important to Dragonlance and a lot of the sort of Dungeons and Dragons series of books imagery was, because there's something to be said about your own imagination, but outside of the context of your own life experience, sometimes it's hard to imagine some of these things visually. And then you see those covers and that just sort of puts everything in perspective and really gets you in the mood. And as much as they say, don't judge a book by its cover, as you were saying before,
everybody does.
Something that we do. I mean, it was huge with VHS on the shelves of every VHS store or rental place, and it's definitely true with bookstores like Barnes and Nobles. At least it was back in the day. So we do really care about that. And I do want to ask you about sort of following in the footsteps of some of the original artists that helped define it, because again, that has to be a little bit intimidating, stepping to those shoes, because you did a lot of the re-release of all the covers from Chronicles to Legends. I mean, was that, did you just sort of grab it and go, or was there any trepidation involved?
No, I was really excited and into them when I remember, the big landscape stuff that they were asking me to do was exactly what I wanted to be doing at that time. So they were just great covers to sink teeth into. But I got a lot of Larry Elmore's artwork and Keith Parkinson and all those guys, their artwork as sort of a style guide from Wizards for things like the outfits and the armor, different stuff that had to be pretty much represented the way they showed it. And but other than that, I was given the freedom to create it with my own style, which was great. But I should say that, all of those guys, I was really way more familiar with the art from D&D and Dragonlance, and especially Keith Parkinson's work, because he had the agency that I had just signed I'd been with him for a while now. His name was Sal Baracca, my agent. I think he's retired now too. But Keith was with him just prior to my being with him, and he had just left the agency. So I had kind of shadowed Keith Parkinson through several stages of my career. And I never met him, but I always admired him, and he was really one of my favorite fantasy painters.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great shadow.
I've met Larry, and I've talked to Larry Elmore, several times over the years, and he's the nicest guy in the world. I mean, you sit down and chat like you know him forever. So it's all great fun. Larry seemed, and Jeff Eastley also, who I know, they seem to appreciate what I did. So I was at least glad that they weren't ready to chastise me for going in the wrong direction,
It's actually really encouraging to hear that they do have style guides for everything, because I remember Larry Elmore mentioning that early on, that they developed that with TSR, but I didn't know whether or not that was followed through with Wizards, and it's nice to know that they did. For sure. You had mentioned that... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Somebody like that, like Wizards of the Coast, that has so many people working on the same project, you have to have some continuity through it. I think you look at the early Magic work, for example, there's a lot less continuity, and they really have nailed that down over the last 20 years or so. But I mean, they definitely have guides for us also. We're not just doing whatever we want. That's the last thing they want is a lot of artists off the hook.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. And it certainly helps connect all of those different universes for the fans as well. You know, people that want to sort of dive
Yeah.
in and have that continuity. Um, and that's something that you know everyone's really used to is different artists' interpretations of the same characters, as long as the characters still feel true, at least in essence, to the actual character that they've come to know and love. When it comes to them approaching you for a new job, you know, you mentioned Vanished Moon, I think, was the first one, and then you did uh, like the ones for Mina, and I mean, first of all, I just have to say the Dark Disciple covers, wow,
Thank you.
amazing work. I think they're probably my favorite of everything from the Wizards of the Coast era. They're brilliant. But I wanted to ask you about because there's one thing about coming in and you know, recreating, not recreating, that's not fair, but, you know, doing your own versions of the established books covers, but then doing something completely new like Vanished Moon, the War of Souls trilogy. How much information do they give you? Do they try to have you sort of recreate a moment, or do they tell you about the characters and say, you know, sort of go with this type of vibe, or is it like how much control do you have versus what they tell you?
Well, a lot of the newer ones, we had Mina, for example, like the Dark Disciple one. So we had her kind of look established,
Mm-hmm.
and I forget what we had talked about her being a little more of like more of a priestess type of outfit on the line. And, so there was a little bit of art direction from them as far as the look they were going for, but really it was a scene. But I remember the hands, the big chess hands in the back of that one. I don't know if you've noticed the big rocks are sort of chess pieces
Right.
in the surf. That kind of stuff, that was stuff I came up with on my own, just to sort of, there was some symbolism involved, and even just a little touch of surrealism maybe or something. So, but that's where, I think I gave them several different options. I'm sure I did, because I always do. And they weren't all in the surf like that. Some of them were centered more around the planets, and but those just happened to be the ones they chose. Now, for a lot of them, I didn't have to read the books, or I didn't read the books before doing the artwork. In some cases, the books weren't even finished all the way. So we were doing covers 6 months or a year in advance of the release. So
Oh wow.
everybody's hustling to finish things up for that kind of book, where there's they're going to put a lot of money into advertising and all that kind of stuff for it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, those covers were a little more me than where the initial, like the Chronicles, those are things that once we established a design for that, which was sort of the three covers or the three figures on the front with a sort of a large landscape behind it.
Right.
Then that became about how I was going to show these environments, the lighting, different things that I could play around with. And there's all kinds of fun stuff in the Dragonlance world. So, it went on and on. I was able to get in some of my influences, like Maxfield Parrish was an influence of mine that influenced me a lot on that Autumn Twilight piece.
Oh wow.
Guys like Alma Tadema and John Leon Jerome influenced Time of the Twins, all the white marble, that kind of stuff. They were just guys that I admired, and it was, I see an opportunity to go, I could do one of those, I could do that kind of painting now, a little sort of a Maxfield Parrish painting. So it was just, they were just cool. They were great to work on. I didn't feel like we ran out of material.
Do you think
so much stuff?
Yeah. Did you ever have a favorite cover that you put together? And maybe not necessarily for Dragonlance, but just in general. I mean, is there just one piece where you put your heart and soul into it and that's your baby?
Well, I like a lot of them. Some of them are, well, without making a lot of excuses about about the good ones and the bad ones, the Time of the Twins is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
With the White City, I just think Raceland, the black robe, the impact of that painting, just worked out pretty well. Everything went as planned. Also Lost Star is one of my favorites with the big trail of ghosts.
Yeah.
That was just a lot of fun to work on, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Goldmoon and Gerard, that was a great cover too. I've been going through and like rereading all of the books and sort of giving reviews of them and stuff, and I'm just sort of, it's all fresh in my head, all the covers of them.
Yeah.
It's really, really great. Was there ever a point where you sort of, they agreed on a design, you deliver, and there's like this kickback? I mean, or are they pretty malleable with what you provide them?
My preliminary work is usually pretty tight. So by the time they see that kind of stuff, after that, there's usually not a lot of issue.
Right.
So most of the conversation happens at that stage. But yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of, they seemed to be pretty happy with what I was doing, and we were in a groove for a good long time.
That's great.
There was only one cover I did. It was for the Raceland Omnibus cover that I did with him pulling the stone out of Fistanulus.
Yes.
And they felt that after that was all completed, and I don't know what happened during all the creative stages, but they felt it was just too violent or something for the cover, so they wound up not using that piece. So that's only available on my site as a print. But that's the only thing. Other than that, they seemed to just kind of keep waving me through, and they were pretty happy with what I was doing.
That's great. I do remember overhearing an interview from Elmore at one point saying in the TSR days, sometimes the turnaround was like days. Like he had to just pump out some stuff so quickly that, in some cases he wasn't even really happy with it. Did you ever have those where you felt like you were just under the gun and maybe they were happy with what you came up with, but maybe you were a little hesitant?
I think, I'm sure that happens. I
know it happens to me, so I just only
there's secrets. I can't call out any covers, but
right.
There's times that happens. And what can you say about that? But I mean, you do your best, and so sometimes it's just the material is, you wish you saw an opportunity to do something else, but it had to be this to make the story work, and there are reasons. So that's part of being a professional illustrator rather than just being a fine artist that can paint whatever they want and make those changes on the fly. Illustration in this thing, it is a team effort. I mean, from the writers to the designers to the illustrators, it's a big group effort to get this thing on the shelf. So you can't have one person just kind of wrote in the middle of it.
Yeah, I would be terrified, especially in the case where the book isn't quite finished yet, as you had mentioned earlier. If you're working off of the information you were given, and they're like, oh, we changed that up, you're gonna have to make some massive changes to these characters now. That would be a nightmare.
That never really happened, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, you have been, you just finished a commission. You recorded some really great process work with your voiceover, talking about how you actually put these paintings together, which is fascinating for anyone who hasn't watched anything like that. I grew up on Bob Ross, and so getting that process is sort of bread and butter for me. I love that stuff. So that's on your YouTube channel. That's going to be linked in the description below. But you are releasing prints of those, right? Do you have a certain number available, or is it just
pre-order going on right now till December 10th? We're not limiting them at this point, so no. But I am offering, for right now at least, we're offering a level of print with a remarked sketch on it.
Okay.
That's available on the site too. So.
Well, I would highly recommend everyone check that out, because it's the female heroes of Dragonlance. I mean, it's Kitty Yara and Goldman, Laurent and everything. It's really fantastic. And you got, people say Sky, I always say Ski, but you have Kitty Yara's wonderful Kellandros' dragon right behind them all, sort of framing it. Brilliant piece, and it's nice to know that you're able to provide prints for people on a pre-order basis that, if you would just never know otherwise, I mean, I think that's great. So I have to ask because it's a Dragonlance channel. Do you have a favorite Dragonlance character?
I guess I like Raceland. I sort of like the guys who are troubled a little
Yeah,
bit, you know.
he certainly was. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it's always sort of falls down on like the side of, well, I like the troubled bad guy, or I like the super silly goofy guys, or it's
yeah,
never. I don't know anyone that's just like, I'm a diehard Sturm fan. That sort of stoic,
yeah.
sort
Very
of
virtuous, but
grumbly knight.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
funny.
Lord Soth, he's one I like. I like
Oh
to
my
paint a lot,
gosh,
you know.
yes.
So
I saw a picture of Soth on your website.
yeah,
Oh my
that was
gosh,
another private commission that I did. Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
great.
there's a lot of Dragonlance fans out there, you know. So some of
Yeah.
them contact me just to paint stuff, just for their collection, not necessarily that it's ever been published or anything. So,
Is that
but
something that
yeah,
you're
that was
you're still willing to do for commissions?
oh yeah, yep,
Okay.
yeah. There's information on my site about on the shop about commission prices and sizes and things like that. If somebody's really interested in that kind of thing.
That's great. And it's the website is mattstawicki.com, just for everyone
Yep.
out there. Again, there's going to be a link in the description. Okay, so I mean, Dragonlance is kind of in a lull right now. The last books were released years ago. Now there is rumor, and it's confirmed between Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman that a new trilogy is coming out. Do you think you're going to get an opportunity to work on those paintings?
I doubt it.
Oh no,
My
really?
my I think that for the same reason they brought me in 20 years after Larry, they'll bring somebody in, newer today. One of there's some guys who are doing some great work at Wizards, and I'm sure that one of those guys will probably get a crack at the covers.
Oh, so let's just say hypothetically, if you were approached, would you be into
I'd
it?
be surprised if they come to me for them. Let me just put it, or Larry for that matter.
Right.
At this point,
Okay.
but you never know. I mean,
Yeah. Well, it would be fantastic of them if they did, because I mean, your art is Dragonlance for generations of people coming up. I mean, from every re-release of the original trilogy that people are breaking into, to the newer novels that were released, sort of doing course corrections for the stories and stuff. I mean, you are the Larry Elmore and Keith Parkinson all rolled into one for tons and tons of fans. It would make sense, in my opinion, if they did reach out to you. But there is another project that just finished its crowdfunding a few weeks ago that you are involved with Tracy Hickman, the Sky Raiders of Abraxas, or Abrax.
yep. And Larry's in too. Yeah, we're all involved in this again. Yeah, which is going
That's
to be a lot of fun.
great. Do you have any information? Well, first of all, how did you get involved within that?
Well, Tracy, in addition to the Dragonlance stuff, I've done covers for him and Laura for different publishers. I did the covers for their Bronze Canticles series a few years. It's been, a number of years now. So I've done some work for him outside of the Dragonlance world. And he just contacted me and said he had this new world and would I be interested in coming on board to do a cover for him. And
Oh,
of
that's
course,
great.
I was ready to go. So it was. Now we haven't really started yet. They did just wrap up the Kickstarter, which did phenomenally well. And I think we'll really be getting into this probably after the holidays.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I was going to do a follow-up question of do you have any idea about specifics of what you're going to be working on? I mean, I know they have sort of comp art for the mock-up of the books and everything, but I don't know if that's going to be
Yeah,
like,
and
finalized.
pretty much that's what I know at this point is what
Okay.
we saw on the Kickstarter so far. Yeah, we haven't really talked about notes or specifics. I know that I think it's an almanac for the world that I'm going to be doing a cover for.
Oh,
We
nice.
just touched on it. Yeah, it's going to be a wraparound cover. I know that much, but as far as like characters and things like that, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. So I know you're a fan of fantasy. I know you're a fan of sci-fi. I also saw some Cthulhu artwork that you've done,
Oh yeah.
which just scratches that horror nerd itch in me. That's fantastic. Are you a fan of Lovecraft, or do you just sort of do the work because of
A little bit, yeah. my wife was a horror person also, which drew me into the horror artwork and all this kind of thing. So Cthulhu and these big sort of ancient gods have always been kind of interesting to me. So
Yeah.
I think it's just a neat subject to mess around with.
Oh yeah, visually for sure. And that's the other side of this. I already sort of made this point before, but I do kind of want to hammer it home because it is really important. Everyone is obsessed with Dragonlance specifically, but also a lot of other campaign worlds because they like the stories, but it's originally the artwork that sells them into picking up the novel. And in a lot of cases, at least
Yeah.
it used to be. I don't know about it anymore. If everything's
Yeah,
digital, I don't know. But it like you are as important as the authors in selling the work, and then you persist. What you create persists even after people have forgotten the story beats, because visually it's instilled in their minds what these characters look like, how the feelings they get when they look at them. It's very much like music. You may not know all the words to the song, but you know how it made you feel when you heard it. And that's why the visual medium of fine arts and illustration is so incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love that artists like you are
You're
getting
the
respect
face
for
of
that.
it out there first for a lot of people. You're the reason they'll pick it up or not.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously, there's a lot of diehards with Dragonlance. It's a little different. You've got some real just committed people that love it. They're going to give it a shot no matter what. But a lot of times, you're the first reason they pick something up. So.
Yeah.
It's a responsibility I think we all take pretty seriously. We want to do a good job for the authors that have put a lot of work into it, or the people who are writing games or whatever. Like I said, it really is a group effort. So the art represents a lot of work by a lot of people. I mean, so it's nice that the illustrator gets some credit and all that kind of thing, but it's a lot of people count on the success of it. There's a lot of a balance there.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can go on and on about that.
No, I think it's great. I guess the other side, I guess, of that coin would be that you've been working in this industry for so long. You have such, you're doing your own Dragons in Nature series and everything. Do you ever get tired of fantasy, or is it something that you just sort of explore different aspects of it, and that sort of fulfills the, maybe otherwise you would get tired if you didn't?
Yeah. Now, for me, I work things into, my work that I want to do. I mean, the fantasy aspect of it gives me a license to really do whatever I want. If I want to do figure painting, then I make the work a little more figure centric. Like I said, if I feel like I'm really inspired by Maxfield Parrish at a certain point, then that may be something you see in whatever comes out in that time period. Yeah. So for me, the inspiration's constantly changing. It's the sort of, I don't even want to say the confines of calling it fantasy. That's the only thing that really groups it all together. For me now, it's starting to become revolve even more around dragons specifically, but I think I can work in almost whatever I want to work into it. So now, I don't really feel limited by it or anything like that. So I don't feel like I got another fantasy painting. I love doing it, So
I think that's great. It would be really cool to see, maybe sometime in the future, doing like an 80s album cover series, and just sort of reimagining of that stuff that you grew up, that brought you into this love of this illustration styles, and just sort of paying homage to that. I think that'd be kind of really fun. I just remember those. I mean, some of those albums are so ridiculous. Like Man-O-War albums were great.
Yeah. Yep.
Just those covers. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just sort of rounding out the conversation, for those coming into this industry, do you have any, advice or suggestions for things that they could do to maybe break in professionally?
Well, the one piece of advice I do give everybody that asks me is to really try and work with a subject that you like. Like I said, for me, it's fantasy. because the field is demanding. The days can be long and all this kind of stuff. There's always going to be a reason to quit if you don't love it. And so if you're really just like in it because you're trying to make a couple dollars or something, there's easier ways to make money. I mean, I think you have to have a passion for what you're doing to be good at it, to stay with it. But as far as, the nuts and bolts of trying to break into the business, it is great to have a mentor. If you can, in these days with the internet, a lot of times people are I've at least found that of the people that I've met in the business, both people that were heroes of mine that I've now come to meet and talk with quite a bit, and just other people that I know, they're very forthcoming and they're just nice folks, most of them. I mean, I haven't run into too many, real problem cases where you're going, God, I just can't believe the guy, So, reach out, email, and there's a lot of, I think a mentorship is a great idea, is I guess what I'm trying to get to with that. If you can get there. There's also great resources available now. There's I guess it's a blog called Muddy Colors that's run by a bunch of artists who are pretty top flight in the business. I think Dan DeSantos is the head of that. He's kind of he's sort of the guy who runs that thing.
That's great.
But there's a bunch of them. But they give advice and they talk about different ins and outs of the business. So you can find that if you Google that, if you're looking for something. And then there is educational opportunities outside of going to something like art school these days. There's a thing called Smart School that is also, it's about a dozen practicing artists, and they basically do small mentorships. So it's not necessarily a commitment of trying to do a 3-year school. It's a 6 or 8 week program that you can do. And I think usually they're looking for fairly advanced people that are looking to get into the field, that are at that point where they're trying to jump into the business. So there's some things like that you can also do. But, with the internet these days and all the accessibility of everybody, I've found most people to be pretty receptive to answering a few questions if you're not demanding on their time. If you just give them some time to get back to you and that kind of thing, most people are willing to try and help you out.
That's great. I mean, coming up in my industry, mentorship was essential. And then, being able to pay it back if someone, asks you questions and really wants to be involved. The reason why people learn these, sort of secret techniques in different industries is because people share them. And the only way you share them is by asking questions and, finding people willing to share those answers. And so I think it's such an important part of almost every arts touched industry, specifically at least. Well, I want to say thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous, and I do genuinely appreciate it. Can you
very welcome.
Let everyone know what the best places online, or maybe the different places online that they could find your work? Can you?
Different places online. I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, and we just started the YouTube channel, which is going to continue to have more process videos.
Great.
Usually if you just search Stawicki, you'll come up with some stuff there. So.
Okay. Well, I do definitely recommend everyone go check out the website because, again, your work is fantastic. You have prints available, and then you have the Ladies of Dragonlance series. Did I say that wrong again? I feel like I'm saying it wrong every time I mention it. That is just great. And so it's all on pre-order. Definitely check it out. Thank you again, Matt. I really appreciate your time. I hope you have a fantastic evening.
You too, Adam. Thank you very much. This was a lot of fun.
And that's it for my interview with Matt Stawicki. He is an incredibly gracious and interesting illustrator whose talent and professionalism are apparent in everything he does. What do you think of the interview? Do you have a favorite painting of his? And if you could commission a painting from him, what would it be of? Feel free to email me at dlsaga@pm.me or comment below. Don't forget to explore his website and storefront and check out his Ladies of Dragonlance prints. Today is the last day to pre-order them. I'd like to once again invite you to consider becoming a member of this channel and remind you that you can pick up Dragonlance gaming materials using my affiliate link, all of which are in the description below. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga, and I hope you'll join me in the celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with Dragonlance Saga, and until next time, Slanjavar.